Before we get started, I just want to say a word about our sponsors. This show is brought to you every month by Got Transition, the National Healthcare Transition Center, which is funded through a cooperative agreement with HRSA and the Maternal Child Health Bureau. Eileen, do you want to say hello? I know you've had a lot going on since our last episode.
Yes, hi everyone. I hope you're all getting over your Thanksgiving hangovers and trying to get back in the swing of things. Yeah, I would love to share with all of you that I guess earlier this month, I was with a small group of really big thinkers in D.C. and talking about how important it is that the voice of youth is infused in policy discussions. And we know with everything going on in D.C. right now at the congressional level, it's so important now that we begin to have these discussions about how do we really embed the voice of youth in all areas. And so it was an exciting time, and again, thanks so much to the Maternal Child Health Bureau for making the radio show possible and for making this priority about youth involvement really forever present in our minds. So I'm real excited for today's show, and really thrilled to know that we have listeners from the entire country to talk about this important topic today. So thanks, Mallory.
Awesome. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to take a couple of minutes to remind everyone how you can contribute to this conversation and ask questions. If you look on the webinar control panel on your screen, you'll notice the chat window, and at the bottom of that, you can send messages in the chat window to either to the whole group or just the presenters. You can also put your questions right into the window that says questions. We will see everything you write in both of these places, and we'll be able to respond and comment on them throughout the show. The questions will also be answered and stored on our website after the show as well. This show is about you, and we want to hear your thoughts and ideas, so don't be shy.
And excuse me, just one second, Mallory. Before we get started in today's episode, can we just take a little backtrack on what we did last time? Because this show today is really like a continuation of last month. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just take a couple of seconds to just remind our listeners what we talked about last time and kind of set you up and set up this conversation in a way so it'll flow nicely. So if that's all right, I just want to remind our listeners that this really is a continuation of the story that Mallory is going to be telling us about her experience with going off to college. And again, thank you, Mallory, for being transparent and sharing some of your, real intimate and personal challenges that you went through. And I just want to ask the listeners to be cognizant, as Mallory is telling her story, to be thinking about how important it is for young people, both with and without special health care needs, to really know what would they do and are they prepared to act in a proactive manner in any kind of a health emergency situation. And as Mallory unfolds her story, you'll understand what why I'm kind of prompting the audience in this way. Because whether young people are at home, or whether they're in college, or whether they're just at a job site, or out of town for the holidays or whatnot, it's really important to understand when you have special health care needs and when you don't. What would you do if you had a health emergency when typically the cultural and societal norm is to hit 911 and do that sort of a reaction? And what we're going to talk about today is really a more proactive, prepared approach for how young people can take control of their own health situation and really be ready and proactive in an emergency health situation. So thanks, Mallory, for just letting me kind of go back, because you talked to us last time about your process of choosing the school and how you got ready. But what we're going to talk about today is how then did you become more independent in your health advocacy for yourself, and how you made decisions as a team and the decisions that you were making on your own. So I just wanted to pause a minute and remind the audience that this is a continuation with a focus, however, on emergency preparedness in a personal healthcare situation. So thanks for letting me take that pause.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And I think at the end of this episode, we'll all see that the real takeaway points are about knowing how to ask for help and where to go for that support. So, as Eileen said, just to recap our last episode for people who weren't present, last month I talked about the steps I took to prepare for transitioning to college. I looked at access and help and support for academic accommodations, and I thought that would make it a smooth transition. But I was far from right. And just to add on to hear that episode from last month, if you weren't present, you can hear that on our website at gottransition.org under broadcasts. So let's pick up from where we left off last month. When I first went to school, I was excited and motivated. I loved my dorm room, which I had all to myself because it was a medical single, which was another step I had taken of going through that process to be approved. I loved the small town vibe of my school and the fact that everyone from my professors to the people at the coffee shop down the street knew my name. I was excited about my classes, even though there were a lot of them. I didn't think anything of it, since that's why I was there. I had lots to keep me busy. But as the days and weeks went on, it began to feel a little too busy. The weather was getting colder, I felt myself growing tired, and a winter cold was setting in. Plus, with going to all my classes and going back and forth from the health center to get my medical needs met, the plan was that they were going to be helping me to set up my daily IV infusions, but they weren't always able to meet with me when I had time, so it got difficult to schedule. With all of this, I was not starting my homework until 11 or so at night. Sleep was not happening, and I couldn't even consider taking extra time to go out and make friends. I remember sitting at my computer when Facebook was just a new concept, looking at all of my friends' photos of college, wondering why I wasn't experiencing any of that fun. I felt alone and discouraged. I missed my friends, my family, my pets, my home, and I cried a lot. It got to the point where I trained myself to make it through the door of my room before I finally broke down. But even hearing my mother's voice on the phone would only bring me to tears. My family felt helpless, and they were there for me no matter what. And at one point, my parents were driving the 45 minutes up to my school to help me with my medical care, just so I could focus on school and my course content. They hated to see me so unhappy, but I refused to quit at that point, and I knew I could get through this. I didn't think college was supposed to be easy.
And Mal, you really bring up a good point here again. If you don't mind, I just want to interject. What you were experiencing was actually quite typical for most college freshman students. You were so dedicated to success. You had a commitment to do it on your own. I've always said the interesting thing about youth and the young adult experience is you have one foot in adulthood and one foot in childhood. And it's hard to really balance, where do I go when I need support? Because I want to be a grown-up and I want to act like an adult and not ask for help. So I just want to indicate that even though all of your determination and with all of your commitment, you said that you were still feeling kind of a sense of sadness and that you felt lonely. And maybe in a rare moment, you were having some self-doubt. We know how self-confident you are, those of us who know you, and so for you to experience a high level of self-doubt, that's a lot for you to even talk about. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm also curious if you would say that maybe you were feeling, maybe having some bouts of depression, because we know that a lot of students go through that. And I just want to bring this up because sometimes we don't think about mental health being health. And we don't even consider that sleeplessness or having feelings of anxiety. Sometimes we forget. And I'm saying me as a parent of a child of 4 young people, including a child with special health care needs, we have to remember how important health is, and that includes mental health. And I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying, that you were dedicated, committed, all of this in addition to your physical health, and yet you were able to identify that, wow, I am feeling really overwhelmed, I've got anxiety, I've got some sadness. So for those of you that are listening, and for those of you who are peer supports and parents who are supporting your young people, just a reminder to check in with them about that, and to encourage our young people to talk about how they're feeling. whether they talk to a friend or their mom or somebody in their class, so just somebody that they trust can give them accurate guidance. And I just can't stress enough how, first of all, normalized we need to make this, that mental health is health, and that juggling a lot of the demands of college, it's a lot to deal with. And I'm curious if there are any listeners out there or parents that have had young adults, if this resonates with any of you out there. So if you have any questions or have any comments, we'd love to hear from you right here on the webinar. As Mallory said, you can either send it in the chat window or in the question box. But anyway, I just wanted to pull that out, and thank you again, Mallory, for being honest about that, and wanted to underscore how important the mental health piece is to overall health.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, looking back, I really wish that that was something I would have utilized early on, you know, maybe going to the services that my campus offered for counseling or support, of having someone to talk to. But at that point, I couldn't even imagine having to schedule something else. And I was still dealing with that stigma that you mentioned about mental health, and I didn't think that was something I had. You know, I wasn't dealing with depression. I just thought that that was the way it was and that college was really hard. But now, with the work I've done in healthcare and having worked with some mental health organizations, I see that mental health affects everybody, and it's a huge component of health. And so I really encourage young people, and really all people, to take care of their mental health and not push themselves to just make it through like I did. It's okay to speak up and recognize when you're not feeling okay about something, or when you are having those feelings of sadness and self-doubt. So don't be afraid to speak up and say when that part of your health, you know, may not be at its best. We don't have any questions at this point, but I would really encourage people just to jump in with any thoughts you have if this was something you went through, or if you have, you know, any questions. So with that, I'll go on. So the turning point for me was when I made the decision to try to push myself to pull an all-nighter and finish one silly English paper. I knew I wasn't feeling well, and my body was definitely telling me to rest, but I was determined to get my work done, since in my mind, that's why I was there to begin with. I ended up finishing my paper, but I woke up after a couple hours sleep knowing that something was definitely wrong. I felt like I had a fever, my heart rate was too fast to count, and I knew my body well enough to know that these were not symptoms to mess around with. I called my mother, and then she told me to immediately go to the health center. So I walked down. Luckily, it was in the same building as my dorm room, once again by myself, and the staff there knew that I was not okay as soon as I showed up in the doorway, looking scared, weak, and pale, in my PJs and my Hello Kitty slippers. This was the best that I could do. I was definitely waving my white flag. So after having a conversation with them, they let me rest, and after a lot of discussion centered around shared goals of my success as a team, we made the decision that I would go home and get treated by my long-standing providers. It turns out I had severe pneumonia, ended up being on multiple IV antibiotics, and being home for several weeks while I recovered. I did work hard and managed to complete all my classes in between resting. And yes, I was determined to be successful, so I was that kid emailing papers from the nurses station to my professors when I was inpatient. This was before the days of Wi-Fi in the hospital. But it was during these weeks at home that I really had to reassess my situation. Did I go back and try it again? Did I switch to a school that was closer and live at home? Did I forget about this whole college thing altogether? Although I weighed all of my options, I decided that I wanted to stick with it, and I knew some changes had to be made. So for the following semester, I worked with my parents and my entire support team to get nursing help that came right to my dorm so that they could help me with my medical care and also check in with me in case I needed anything else. I had a lot more active role in selecting my classes, and I made sure I didn't take more credits than I knew I could reasonably handle. with that extra support, I was able to focus on my academics and even was able to have a little bit of fun and finally make some friends. The biggest lesson that I learned, though, through all of this was to listen to my body and really put my health first. I had to not be afraid to speak up when I felt like things were getting to be too much. A huge part of being a leader in your own healthcare is recognizing your breaking point and getting that support before you reach it.
Wow, that's, I bet that was scary. I mean, in addition to other feelings that we talked about loneliness and sadness, I bet you had a little bit of fear with that. And it sounds like you learned a lot. Of course, as a parent, I would love to know what your mom learned and what kind of lessons learned that she, as going on, and I know helping your younger sister go off to college this year, if there could be some lessons learned that other parents might support each other. But that's kind of a side note. But I wanted to just acknowledge that I'm pretty impressed. I'm amazed at how you were able to really dig in and say, A, my education is important, B, I have special health care needs and I'm not going to let it define me. I can be a college graduate like everyone else, and I'm going to have to take some accommodations and take a pause and really assess this in a very kind of one of the things I talk about often is intellect over emotion, and sometimes we really got to think through these high emotion times by putting the emotion aside for a while and really get to into an intellectual conversation about what are the best ways to move forward. So I just want to acknowledge that you went through a lot, and I could see what a huge process and what progress that made for you. I would imagine, and again, I don't want to speak for you, but if that all happened in your first semester, I can only imagine how it's what you learned helped you in the rest of your 3.5 years that you were there. So I think that that's pretty incredible. And I don't know if you want to comment to that, but I do have a couple other comments that I'd like to make. So
yeah, definitely. You know, as things progressed, there were some more bumps in the road. I did end up getting pneumonia a couple of semesters after that, before I got the vaccine, of course, which no one told me about until much later. But I learned how to recognize, you know, when I wasn't feeling well and when I needed to take, you know, those steps to not let it get to the point where I would have to miss so much school. And I do want to take 1 minute before we move on. We had one question about if I felt that the scheduling issue was, you know, a concern in addressing my mental health, and as I had mentioned, and how that could be worked around. And I think that's a really good point, and I think that is something that needs to be considered when we think about putting our health first in all aspects. I think especially when you're a busy young person, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm too busy, oh, I'll go later. I'm definitely guilty of putting off lots of appointments or making appointments because I just have so much on my plate. And I think in college it's even more pertinent to try to avoid those things and make excuses. But in hindsight, I definitely wish that I would have, you know, carved out that time to have someone to talk to and just take that break from everything that was stressing me out at the time. So I think it is an issue, but I think there are also ways around it to make sure that we put our health first. So Eileen, did you want to make your additional comments?
yeah, I think that was a really good segue of what I wanted to say, because what I'm also picking up is that we have to understand the difference between health and health care, and that as young people, being wise healthcare consumers and being independent thinkers when it comes to their healthcare, have to understand health and wellness and decisions that support or are not supportive of that. But when we want to experience optimal wellness, and I know this sounds like a commercial for a pharmaceutical or something, but I'm so struck by that question that our listener brought in, but also I was picking that up in your story that really you were putting off your healthcare intervention because you were looking at all the other things that you were juggling at the time. But when we switch our mentality through this healthcare transition and understand that health and wellness has got to be part of the conversation, then when you schedule your college classes or you're scheduling your just everyday living, as you said, Mallory, as being a busy young person, it always goes back to the sometimes overused cliche where people say, so what are you doing for you? Or how are you taking care of you? And we really have to pay attention to that. I think especially during this time of year where the calendars are filled with seasonal events and community events and whatnot, that we have to be able to stop and say, A, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting the appropriate nutrition? Am I exercising? Those kinds of things, so that we don't have to access the health care system. And I think that's a role that we can all play as a leader in our own situation, a leader in our own lives, and to be able to say, health is important, wellness is important, and then when I go to the intervention of a healthcare visit, then I know exactly what I can tolerate, what I can do, and what's important. Because I thought what was interesting in your story, Mal, is that you talked about you knew you were you went in there with your little kitty slippers, which I thought was so funny, and I can just so see that was your white flag. That was your way of saying, now I know that I cannot go forward. You were recognizing that you needed support, but you knew your health triggers enough to know of when to surrender to that. And I think that that's really, really, really important. And that you called in your support. In this case, you called your mom. And if she was not available, I'm sure you would have called the health center. But you know enough about your body and your health that your initial reaction was not to call 911. You know that you have health concerns that need to be handled in a comprehensive way. And I think that that's a huge lesson here, that you had a support network around you, a true medical home team that includes your family, the campus providers, the at-home providers, some mental health we were hoping would be in there, but we have a lesson learned on that. And that was an incredible process that you learned to take care of your health and your wellness. So I think that's a lot for us to learn from.
We have a really great question that I want to address from Darcy. It says, you mentioned getting home type nursing care in your dorm room. Who supported this, the college, your health insurance, or a waiver? And this was something that I had been receiving at home through my insurance. And I was lucky enough that the agency I was going through at home had an office nearby my school. So I was able to work with them, and I had a couple of nurses that would take different shifts. I had some that were stronger than others, and those relationships I could do a whole show on. But it was something that was already in place when I was living at home, and so we were able to just kind of switch the office that it was out of. And so I know that currently I'm living at home again and would have to go through that process again since things have changed. But I would definitely start with seeing what you're eligible for in terms of your coverage, whether it be private insurance or state insurance. Or I also know that in terms of personal care services, I know some young people right now who have actually gone through the nursing program at their school and have other students helping them, and it was someone that they were able to meet and interview and felt comfortable with them helping with daily things. So there are definitely a lot of options for getting those supports, and for me it just happened to be something that was already in place. Eileen, do you want to add anything?
I do think that's a really good point, and yes, you answered that well, and thank you, Darcy, for bringing this up. I think that the key is to go through kind of the standard home health protocols, which generally involves first just knowing whether or not your insurance plan covers home health as a benefit. And most Medicaid plans do cover home health with the appropriate doctor, physician kind of prior authorization. And then the second piece to that is then finding a home health agency in the community, whether it's in the college town or in your own community, depending on what the situation is, who will accept the home health benefit rate that Medicaid or your insurance plan is going to make. And generally most communities, whether it's a county or a township or whatnot, have home health. It's typically directed more toward I would say acute care, like recovery from an acute incident like a car accident or stroke or that sort of thing. So you have to be very clear that this is an ongoing special health care need, and therefore the continuity of care and the longevity of care might look a little differently. But it just starts with finding out first, do you have a benefit? And most Medicaid waivers and straight Medicaid will pay for home health. And then from there, private insurance, it gets a little more tricky. But it's generally a fairly common benefit package underneath within a Medicaid plan.
Thank you. So with that, I want to start wrapping things up. This is such a huge topic of talking about mental health and health really encompassing the whole person. And so this is a theme that we are going to come back to time and time again in these episodes. So please continue to submit your questions through our various forums that we have. I just want to remind you, after this episode is finished, there will be a simple evaluation of your thoughts on this episode. You can find us on Facebook, and we now have a Twitter account, which will keep you posted on all of these events, and also maybe do some live tweeting from different things that Got Transition is represented at. There is also... we are also available as a podcast on iTunes, which I still think is just so exciting. If you search Got Transition, you can subscribe, and when new episodes are uploaded, you will be notified. And that is great to listen to either in the car, at the gym, or whenever you tune into those. You can also register right now for the next episode, which will be on December 28th. And in that episode, we're going to be talking about ways that youth and families can prepare and make sure that they really get the most out of time permitted within a doctor's appointment, and a little bit about how to start building those relationships. So again, that will be on December 28th, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. And I also want to share with you a video that was done by some of our partners at the University of Florida. And it's another story about a young man who has a disability and some special health care needs, and his attitude and experiences with going to college. And I just thought it really kind of echoed a lot of what I said and our beliefs here at Got Transition. So if you want to check that out, that is right there for you. And again, as I said earlier, you can catch our previous episodes on our website under broadcast at gottransition.org. We encourage you to keep up to date, stay posted, tell all your friends about us. And if there are no more questions, I guess we will get ready to sign off and wish everyone a happy December. Eileen, do you want to have some final words?
I am just thrilled that we are having these open and honest and authentic conversations, and I thank all of the listeners for hanging in there with us and continuing to be a part of these conversations. We'd love to hear from you, through the month so that we know best what's on people's minds. And thank you again, Mallory, for being transparent about feelings and about your struggles and your triumphs. I think all of that is very important. And I'm really, really excited to talk about how to be better prepared and how to be wise healthcare consumers in preparing for a physician visit. So that's next month, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And with that, I just want to remind everyone, Mallory and I do not consider ourselves the one and onlys on this topic. So we just are passionate about talking about it. So if you have any experiences you want to share, if you have any differing views or some thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. So please stay in touch throughout the month, and we'll just hold on until next month and hopefully have a very robust conversation at that time as well.
Absolutely. So share your feedback, any thoughts, any ideas for future episodes, remaining questions. All the questions from today's episode will be posted on our website. And with that, we will sign off. Thanks for listening, and remember, every transition is unique, just like you.